The road to design and architecture practice is different for every designer and every architect. Award-winning architect Michael Gabellini of Gabellini Sheppard Associates leads a team of international, talented, and passionate designers and architects who help create the incredible and high-profile work the firm is known for. From Turkey, Özlem, also an award winner and the principal designer, with experience and vision in a wide range of hospitality, retail, and residential interior design projects. Tomoko oversees the sourcing of all materials, furnishings, and fixtures for the firm, which gives the projects the magic that is Gabellini Sheppard. Emily is an interior designer with a detailed, oriented eye. Having worked in Paris and Los Angeles, she has that expertise which marries her interior design and millwork engineering degrees. And we'll also hear from Joel Robert. He is the Director of New Business and Marketing, and he'll guide us through the work of the team and this session. These professionals will share their experiences in developing their own gift in design practice and a look into how that journey led them to join Gabellini Sheppard and help build the studio's reputation for excellence. It's now with great joy and pleasure that I introduce you to Gabellini Sheppard.
Thank you very much for that very warm introduction, Beth. We appreciate it. We're excited to be here. This is our fourth year, I think, participating in this program, and the second year we participated in this format. So we're very excited, and though we can't see all of you, we're hoping to share something that inspired you today. So let me start by first talking to you a little bit about our studio itself. What is most widely known about our studio is our range and our reach. We are based in New York City, which provides a wonderful point of view and familiarity with global design from Seattle to Singapore. Our work, as you can see in this small representation here, strikes a balance between architecture and interior design, finishes and furnishings, all with a unique point of view of the collaborators and the clients we engage with. We are a team of architects, interior designers, and product designers, working to achieve success with a wide range of technical expertise partners, both locally and internationally. Our partners work with our associates in tandem, meaning that we have a flat studio structure and everyone is involved on each project. We collaborate together in this way from concept to implementation. This flat structure ensures that our clients have our full scope of insight and experience at all stages of design. Design partners Michael Gabellini, who you'll hear from in a minute, and Kimberly Sheppard bring their creative expertise and passion together in ways that are both complementary and inspiring. Michael, a master of minimalism and our chief thinker, maker, and doer, is a maestro in the art of nuance, finding beauty in the essential design elements that enhance the daily qualities of life. And Kimberly, equally skilled in all aspects of design, from business technicalities to complex layouts and through to construction, is a careful composer of form and process. Together, these two lead our team with precision and artistry. Our work spans, our clients have one thing in common: intensive brand perspective, which means no two projects are alike. We have provided the DNA for companies to build new businesses, to highlight their values, and to achieve a very specific goal of translating their ideals into beautiful and useful interiors. These clients value collaboration above all else, and we welcome the synergy we find in creative collaborations with major design influences in all of our typologies. Highlights, as you can see here, include Jill Sander, Ferragamo, and Giorgio Armani in retail, Anda Andre and Ian Schrager, whose innovative approach to hospitality has redefined that world. And in architecture, Alvaro Ceza, Bjarke Engels, and Tado Ando have all partnered with us to create interiors to enhance their incredible building designs. Our clients can be found across the US and Canada, and found in every corner of Europe, and considerable presence is now building in China as well. And as markets continue to evolve, we continue to chase them. But today, our presentation is not just about who we have worked for, it's about the people and the work that we do. So the typologies that you see here, from retail, hospitality, public spaces, restaurant design, residential, condominium development, exhibitions, and products, are all areas where we find equal inspiration and our team provides their equal expertise. A few of these projects, I'm not going to go too far into any one aspect, but just so you have a taste of what we do. In the private residential world, this is a project we're working right now on in Aspen called Wilby Way. The site actually, as you can see, speaks for itself in these images. It's heavily mountainous and an inspiration in and of itself. The home we are helping to conceive here will be one that celebrates the setting while enhancing the life and style of those living inside of it. Interiors are envisioned as an outside-inside relationship where windows and materials connect with the colors and textures just outside the home, creating an expansiveness perfect for relaxation or meditation from day through to night. In New York City, we have the 56th Street condominium project that we are working on in collaboration with Alvaro Ceza. Pritzker Prize winning architect has created this totem on the city's west side, rising in its use of form and simplicity and creating a building that is enhancing the interior with all aspects of design, from amenities to homes of varying sizes. Shown here, the duplex unit has a soaring double height space looking out over the Hudson River, perfect for taking in an evening sunset while entertaining on the deck outside. In retail, a recent project we've just completed in New York City, if you're coming to New York City, please make sure you take a minute to visit it, is our recent collaboration with David Yurman. We've been working with David Yurman for quite some time, creating interiors perfectly suited for them. And with their new creative director, Evan Yurman, we've designed this new flagship on 57th Street in New York City. Designed to express the brand values of American modernity that clients have, the warmth and elegance in the soaring triple height space unfolds to provide an intimate experience as one moves through. We also created the first edition hotel, this one being in Istanbul. It's the second project in our branded collaboration between Ian Schrager and Marriott International, and represented the next generation of international boutique hotels. Located in the city's Levant business district, the understated and gracious 78 Key Hotel balances international sophistication, specific cultural context that stands at the gateway of this city between Europe and Asia. Traditional Turkish materials and techniques are reinterpreted with a modern sensibility for an exotic, customized lifestyle experience. And finally, we take you to the center of New York City, Rockefeller Center, where we've been an active design partner in the evolution of this space. 30 Rockefeller Center is the home to GE, NBC Broadcasting Studios, and the legendary Rainbow Room restaurant, as well as the Top of the Rock viewing experience, which you see here. These observation decks atop the building were reopened to the public and integrated with new interior spaces we created to create an enhanced visitor experience from the ground up. We've also been the creative force behind the remodel of the historic Rainbow Room and its adjacent bar, Bar 65. And most recently have been working with a team of New York's most elite designers to recreate the Rockefeller Center public realm, meaning everything from the experience of walking through the plaza, through to the retail, the gardens, the sunken plaza, which is now created for use during the summer, and as we all know it, the skating rink in the winter. Upcoming projects where you'll be able to find us happen to be in Europe, China, and the United States, where we have some key highlights here. And they come as this time period ends with the pandemic and the world surges back into the world of design. We're pleased to be working on projects from as far remote as China through to Dallas on hotels, retail, and restaurants. So with that, I'll stop our share and introduce you to the people behind Gabellini Sheppard, who you've come to hear from today. And the first person that we'll be speaking with is Emily Vivant. Emily is an interior designer who has been with Gabellini Sheppard for almost 2 years. She grew up and studied in Brittany, France, and graduated in both millwork engineering and interior design. She's worked in the United States and France and has worked for companies such as Gula, John Store Design prior to joining Gabellini Sheppard in 2019. Hello, Emily.
Hi, Joe.
So Emily, as we're talking to everyone today, how about you start with telling us about your journey growing up in Brittany and becoming an interior designer in New York City?
Sure. So, when I was 14, 15 years old, I already knew what I wanted to do. And at that point in France, you have two solutions. You can either pick a general traditional school and then enter an interior design school, or you can do a more creative school in art and then join an interior design school. None of them really attracted me. I already wanted to really feel connected to the field and kind of find something more technical in a way. I started looking around, and luckily I found in my hometown a school offering millwork engineering degrees. I decided to join, and I ended up doing 5 years of millwork engineering studies and 3 years of interior design studies. And I did a lot of internship during my studies, from doing shop drawings for cruise boats, for millwork in Brittany, to my last internship as student. So when I was in interior design school, I had to do a 4 or 5 months internship. I wanted to do it abroad to learn how to speak English. And luckily I found something in Los Angeles. I went there and I just fell in love with, the American market. We do interior design here. And since then, I kept splitting my time between France and US.
Well, that's wonderful, and we're happy that you did decide to do that. Coming from such a background where design is so important as France, can you tell us a little bit about how you feel the French culture influences your sense of design?
Sure. I think one of the main things to know about me is my family are farmers. So my grandfather and now my father and my sister are working in an old farm, which is actually owned by a castle. So I grew up near a park with a beautiful castle and the old farm. And I was always so fascinated by this really old architecture. And to me, it was so beautiful. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to become an interior designer. So I was always so fascinated by history of design, history of architecture, and I think it's something I still really find passion in. I'm still really interested in that. And I do believe it's still one of my main inspirations. And actually, I find that joining Gabellini Sheppard, it's something we really use all the time. Every time we start a new concept, a new project, we find inspiration a lot into previous artist projects or architectural references. So I think it's something really important in a company as well.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned it, though, we're talking about your background in millwork design. You studied this instead of a traditional creative arts school route and still found yourself, with all these passions and inspirations behind you. Do you think the particular study of millwork is what brought you into the interior world? Is it still something that interests you?
Definitely. I feel like millwork is kind of my first love in the industry. So it's something I'm still really attracted to and attached to. I had many experiences, with millworkers. I was really lucky to find really great mentors in Brittany and still, in US. And it's definitely something that I really like. I can share one of my experience. I think the best I had was when I finished my millwork degree and I entered the interior design school. For my final exam, I had to do an interior design project, of course, but also a product design one. And at that time, I decided to create a lawn chair. And the whole idea behind the lawn chair was, you know, to create something really comfortable. So I decided to build it to, you know, prove my point and make sure I was actually right. And I was looking around and I find an amazing craftsman near my parents' home, Tristan. And he accepted to build the chair with me. The condition was you come to the workshop and you build it with me. So I went there with my brother for a day or two and we did the chair, the three of us. And it was amazing. I think it truly impacted me and, you know, impacted the way I actually feel about millwork even today.
That's fantastic. And I remember when you started with us, this chair was such an integral part of how you identified yourself. And through the values and the experience that you had putting that together, I remember we really got to understand who you were as a designer. You talk about mentorship and this experience of the mentorship and your experience building the chair for the millwork engineering degree. That's impacted your experience in design now in many ways. Can you tell us about how that continues to carry forward?
Definitely. I think first during my millwork engineering studies and my internship, I really learned to respect the people that build things. I mean, I think it's totally different when you design something in your mind and you do drawings and when you actually build it. And I think that without these people, we won't be able to do our work today. So I think that's something that is still really impacting me today. And, you know, every time I'm sketching something like a piece of millwork and we do that in every project. It's a way to actually do like a really custom tailored project. So every time I'm doing a drawings, I'm always trying to put my head into the head of the people who will make it to kind of like make it easy to them and make sure that the design I have in my mind will actually become reality. So, you know, you have a lot of things to take into consideration. One thing I learned into my millwork engineering degrees is you have to understand that the time spent into the workshop to build things is actually cheaper than the time spent into the field when you install the piece. So I always try to, you know, find a way to actually be sure that the time spent in the workshop will be better and will be like more efficient. So when they come on site, they can just install easily and, you know, make sure our design is becoming real.
It's such an interesting idea behind design leadership and understanding who is crafting and creating the pieces that we bring to life, right? So that's wonderful. Tell me, so far with Gabellini Sheppard, what have been your favorite projects you've been on?
Many. All of them are always interesting. I feel like you always learn something in every project, so it's really hard to choose. But I think I tend to prefer personally projects that are accessible to everybody. I like the idea of creating an experience that everybody can, you know, try and test and create memories around. So in that sense, I really like hospitality projects, public spaces, amenities. I know on the last slide you mentioned Berkeley Hotel. I think it's one of the experience Gabellini Sheppard create that it's going to be really interested. And I'm also working on Sky Club right now. I think it's also going to be very exciting. And of course, product design. As you know, during COVID, we started Product Design 9. And I really enjoy that. I mean, we are working with really amazing and talented manufacturers over the world. And I think it's really great because when you meet with them, you just throw an idea and every team is speaking and you just take the best of every team to the benefits of the product itself and then to the future user. So I think that's one of my favorites.
That's great. The product design, as you know, because we work together on this, is such an interesting evolution in the ebb and flow of our company, right? To think that, you know, in the beginning, it is all about crafting perfect interior, but then when you realize the perfect interior comes down to the perfect components, and as designers, we have the chance to touch them all. So I love the fact that you bring that up. Thank you. Well, thank you, Em. Next up, we have Tomoko Hirose. Tomoko is a senior interior designer and associate at Gabellini Sheppard and has been with our studio for 11 years now. Born and raised in Japan, she came into interior design as her second career and has worked at MLK Studio in Los Angeles and at Gensler. Hello, Tomoko.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Tomoko Hirose.
Tsuboko, thank you for joining us and thank you for taking part of this with us today.
Of course, my pleasure.
You are always so polite and so charming. um, I think let's start here. Having been born and raised in Japan, what led you to where you are now in New York City?
Well, as Joel explained to you, I was born and raised in Japan, and then interior design is my second career. Actually, I majored in English literature at college in Japan and worked at the insurance company. While I was working at the insurance company, I practiced the floral design, and that's how I became interested in design itself. I came to the United States because of my husband's business, and I started my interior design education at my late 20s. It's a little bit later. And I went to UCLA Extension Interior Design in Los Angeles and graduated. And I worked at a couple of firms, small, large, residential, and hospitality department before landing at the Gabellini Sheppard.
Well, that's quite a journey, literally, physically, and professionally to come into this. Tell us a little bit about floral design. That's so interesting to me. What is the impact that floral design had on your journey into interior design?
Yeah, definitely. My experience in floral design was my starting point, and actually it's a great trigger to pull out my creativity and curiosity out to the world. And I learned from my experience and also from mentor floral design or flower arrangement is not the simple decoration on your tabletop. And it should not be superficial, or it should be more related to you or viewers, or it's resonate into your heart. So basically we are going to create some small space with some flowers, and it creates some ambience or feel to make you happy, relax, or excited. So I thought that's the important lesson, or it's a power of design. And that's how I became interested in interior design, creating something space more larger scale. Especially I'm into how interior design affects you and your emotion.
That's beautiful. It's artistry in motion when you talk about it that way. It's literally 3D environments that are all about art. Right. I like how you said it affects your mind and emotions. Well, yeah, definitely. You mentioned a little bit about your studies in California. So once you realized your passion for interior design, how did you decide to pursue it specifically? And what was your path from then on?
Well, although I became interested in interior design, but it didn't mean to go to professional school in the first place when I came to the United States. But one day I found very interesting interior design seminar open to public at UCLA Extension. And it was about the interior design and psychoneuroimmunology. So the subject is related to the relationship between interior design and psychology. And I took the class and I found it's very intriguing. And I took it serious to learn more about the interior design professionally. And I made a decision to pursue my career path as an interior designer. And I attended the school, and during the school days, of course, we learned a lot how to draw, how to draft, history of art and architecture. But in somehow, I feel very limited to expose myself to material, how to use or what kind of material are out there in the market. And I thought that's my weak point. So I made a decision to take a part-time job at the small residential studio in Los Angeles. And actually, that was very great exposure to me. Basically, I went to the showroom or vendor to get some sample, or I went to the project site with my boss and to see the real application in the real world. And it was a great experience. And eventually, I was so lucky, I was hired by that company as a junior designer after the graduation. So, and then when I moved to New York area from Los Angeles, I joined Gensler Hospitality Department because of my experience with the high-end residential. And later, I joined Gabellini Sheppard because of my hospitality experience and also FF&E specification experience. So I feel all of the experience you did are all connected, all matter, and how I made my career.
And tell us, how did you find your path to Gabellini Sheppard?
Well, actually, I mean, when I was in LA, still I think I was a student. I was flipping through some magazine, and then I found that Gabellini Sheppard featuring some residential project. It was so beautiful. I was so inspired, especially the way we use light, natural light and artificial light, and also detail-oriented the room. All of those images intrigued me so much. And then that time I was still a student, but I thought, okay, one day if opportunity come, I will apply for the Gabellini Sheppard. And actually it came true.
That's wonderful. The power of the image,
Exactly.
from the marketing side. Yes, that's wonderful. Tomoko, we're so glad you're with us. And how about you? What are some of your favorite projects that you've been on with us, and why?
Well, it's really hard to choose, definitely, but I would say Rainbow Room. As many of you can already see some of the project photo on the screen, but it's an iconic historic landmark in New York City. And then so it was a great project location in the first place. And also there was a 4-year-long project. It was the first project at the Gabellini Sheppard for me to get involved from the beginning to the end, to the completion. So it was a really great learning experience to attend a lot of meetings, to see a layer of consultant client, and also to see the process of landmark approval. So that was great to see all the process. Also, I was given great opportunity to work on design, for instance, carpet or custom FF&E item. And also I enjoy a lot researching and then sourcing architectural finishes and material for that project. So it was a great experience. And also it was quite worthwhile seeing the great transformation of the space anyway. So it was wonderful.
And just so everyone is aware, how long did that project last from beginning to completion?
I think that's 4-year long.
4 years, yeah, to produce something that's complex and that important.
Right.
Yes. Well, Tomoko, I think that's about as much time as we have to talk to you at the moment. We could always talk to you about more. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And then we'll come to Özlem. So Özlem Akçay is a principal interior designer and senior associate at Gabellini Sheppard. Born and raised in Istanbul, Turkey, she has been with our studio for 13 years and has led every major condominium and hotel project in our portfolio, including collaborations I've mentioned with Bjarke Ingels, Richard Rogers, Tato Ando. And prior to joining Gabellini Sheppard, she worked as a senior designer at Javel Puschelberg. So welcome, Özlem.
Hello, Joel. Hello, everybody.
Özlem is also a fellow Libra, who I love very much. So, Özlem, you grew up in Istanbul, Turkey, as you mentioned. What was your journey to working as an interior designer in New York City?
Well, it was a long journey, I have to say. After finishing high school in Istanbul, I went on to study artistry in Vienna, Austria. And after 3 years of artistry there, the education felt very dry to me and very limited in its application. And I had this growing need to express my creative side. And also having a dad who is an architect, I had this natural connection and affinity to design from a very early age on. So I would say that these are the reasons that propelled me to change my path in life to pursue interior design.
And that path, starting in Istanbul, do you attribute certain elements of what you're doing today to the impact that Istanbul had on you then?
Of course I do, in many different ways. As you know, Istanbul is at the intersection of East and West. And I grew up in the 90s, and 90s were the time basically when Istanbul was going through this transformation, and the art scene as the cultural scene was flourishing. And I was a teenager back then, and I, was exposed to many different, art movements, and I was spending countless hours going to different exhibitions, spending time in museums, reading. It was a very exciting time to be there. So I believe that definitely contributed to, my turning into a designer and gave me lifelong inspiration.
That is wonderful. I think I was reading here in some of your notes that as a young child, you took part in arranging and rearranging the furniture in your apartment, among other things that were exciting interests to you at the time. So tell us about some of the other interests you have, which have continued to lead you in pursuing interior design at the level that you are today.
Well, I have to say that being a visual person, my first loves were cinema and photography. And as a young person, I spent countless hours, watching movies, especially new wave movies by European masters. And most of it were black and white. And I spent a lot of time going to museums, to cultural events with my parents, because I was the firstborn and they couldn't leave me home by myself. So they would, take me to all these different events. So I think that all of this sort of contributed to the sharpening of my aesthetic eye, my sense for composition, proportion, and visual balance. I was also drawn to interior design because it is a multidisciplinary field to be in, and I kind of felt that I could express my creative side in many different ways.
So in that expression of design in many different ways, so tell us about what are the elements of design then that excite you the most in that perspective?
So many different things, I would say. First of all, I believe that design can engage us on an emotional and sensory level, right? There's a very real sensory and emotional aspect to design, the effect that you would get from living in these spaces. And design and spaces have a direct and subliminal effect on our lives, our well-being and psychology. Design can elevate the quality of our lives. So I believe that as designers, we are actually acting as, agents of change.
Agents of change. I love that. There's a continuing conversation that we're having between all three of you that talk about psychology of design and how that affects the quality of life and in the possibilities of life. Agents of change. I love that. Awesome. So tell us about your work with us here at Gabellini Sheppard. What drew you to our studio, and what are your favorite projects?
Well, 13 years ago, when I came on board, I was actually quite familiar with the portfolio, of Gabellini Sheppard. At that time, I was really intrigued by the conceptual and the singular spaces that Michael Gabellini and Kimberly Sheppard were designing. And, the integration of lighting, the use of tones and volumes, defining spaces felt very, very different to me, and timeless and modern. And some of these spaces actually almost read like an abstract painting to me. So I was very much intrigued by all of this, and I had the desire to join the team in 2008. And here I am after 13 years and counting.
And tell us about some of your favorite projects within those 13 years.
Well, I think the first 2 years, I was very fortunate to work on very, important projects for the firm, which was David Yurman flagship on Madison Avenue. It was the first, project that we worked with David and Sybil Yorman. And also we worked with them as a family, and they do come from a sculptor and painter background. That was one of my first projects, and it also gave me the opportunity to work closely with Michael Gabellini and Kimberly Sheppard, and actually get a good sense about how they approach design, as well as what the design sensibility of the firm was. I also had the pleasure to work with Vera Wang, her bridal store in LA, which, unfortunately was not built due to the economic crisis, but that was an amazing project because she's a very progressive and conceptual thinker. And also, of course, Istanbul edition has a, special place in my heart. Being from Istanbul, I got to work with not only Ian Schrager and his team, but also with a team from Istanbul. And I was traveling back and forth during construction, which was quite an interesting thing because my education is actually from the U.S. and culturally, there are, of course, differences, how people approach design and how they speak about design and their attachments to what they do. So it gave me definitely a different way of looking at, design and how you build design and how do you make the design intent actually, how do you communicate that to people from different backgrounds?
It's such a full circle moment for you too, right? With that, coming back to Turkey to do that project.
And it turned out to be a beautiful project.
And still is. Well, it's no longer an Edition hotel today, but we still have wonderful reviews on that project. And it's definitely been an important one in our portfolio. Thank you very much, Oz. We appreciate everything you've had to share with us.
My pleasure.
And then, of course, we're going to be speaking now with Michael Gabellini himself. And Michael was the founding partner of Gabellini Sheppard just over 27 years ago, and has been its creative director ever since. Michael is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects and has won plenty of awards for work within the studio, and has given numerous lectures on his design experience and, importantly, his design philosophy. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, everyone. And certainly it's a pleasure to be with my current colleagues. And it's a wonderful conversation to have about this idea of practice and of practitioners. And it's something which, is just, as we say, a kind of river that runs through our studio.
It absolutely is. The interesting thing when we talk about that concept of the river running through our studio is everyone has that journey along that river, right? And I think it would be really important for everyone listening to understand what your path was like itself, from your time growing up in Pennsylvania through to co-founding Gabellini Sheppard Associates.
Well, I'll be happy to do that briefly. I think it's something which, for me, and really as we were talking about in the studio to develop this presentation with this idea of practice, and to be on the road to practice doesn't mean if you're just starting or if you're in the middle or if you're at the end of the road. It's being on the road, it's being on a path, and it's really finding this very special journey about design, and also about the way in which it brings you close to and in touch with a world of ideas, a world of colleagues around the world, and the way in which we engage with this discipline, which we all share and love to think about as design. And so I think that for us, this idea of practice and being a practitioner, it's also thinking about ourselves, that in life, we never stop being the student, and we're always looking for teachers which to help guide us along our path. And I think that if you are just starting out or thinking about and not even being a designer yet, but this is something which you already have an intuition, you already have a kind of shared interest in that. And that is something which everybody has background, everybody has their own sensibility about the way which they approach design. And I think that for us, I mean, you never stop being a student. At the same time, you never stop being a teacher. And so for us, I mean, this whole idea of being a mentor, both in studio, out of studio, of really thinking about our studio as a kind of round table. And that, as you mentioned, this idea of flat studio, that everybody participates, everybody brings to them a wealth of knowledge, of experience, of perspective. So if we're doing a project in China, it's wonderful to have colleagues that are from China. And as we have, you know, on this wonderful panel, Tomoko from Japan and Emily from France and Aslam from Turkey, that this is, for us, this very buoyant and very kind of oxygenated sort of studio. It's like an ecosystem. And we all work and engage with each other and off of each other in the way in which then we're both student and teacher 10 to 15 times over the course of one day. And I think that for us, I mean, this whole notion of onto the road to practice is that the most important thing you have to do in your role as a designer, or even an interest that you have in design, is to simply wake up and practice. And if I can offer, I mean, the road which I took is from a small country village in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia. But we happen to live 2 farms away from the Knoll factory. Florence and Walter Knoll, which founded from Cranbrook, this absolutely wonderful factory hyper studio of production and capacity, and one of the foremost American modern engines that have ever existed within North American design. My father was a sculptor and an artist. He was also working at Knoll at that time. And my mother, on my mother's side, that's the one reason why we grew up in the country, because she was from a German family, came through Pennsylvania during Penn's Landing, and this is in the 1700s. So we were embedded in nature, in farming country, but yet just 2 farms away from this absolute hyper turbocharged modern sort of furniture and product design facility. And what was most interesting about that is that with my German sort of ancestry, very much into horses and everything animals and everything about farming. And that led to this very interesting intersection, because while my father was working at Knoll, both as a kind of sculptor and artist of the models that he was working with, on my mother's side, I was traveling to Pennsylvania probably once or twice every month or 6 weeks to the animal auctions. And at the animal auctions were all the Amish and Mennonite. And it was my 2 uncles that were blacksmiths and furriers that actually had the contract to take care of the horses and all of the animal stock, you know, within the Amish and Mennonite community. And it was one of my first design, kind of like formative design, like wake-ups, where I was in these 2 Amish farmhouses, and in their barns, that half of the furniture which they had in that were these wonderful new, recently issued and released production of Knoll furniture. And it was Walter Knoll that drew both the Amish and the Mennonite because of their amazing capacity at both woodworking, glass blowing, metalworking, whatever it is that you fabric and furniture design in general. And that was something which he brought both the Amish and the Mennonites into actually work in the production lines and actually be the ones that were the makers and doers within the factory. And the fact that then the Amish thought that for the price, they got it very inexpensively. The look, they made it in 4 colors, which the Amish colors of blue, yellow, white, and green. And because they were able to work on it, they actually brought it into their home as the only other modern furniture that they ever had. And for me, with my father's connection to George Nakashima, to the Harry Bertoia family, we grew up with the Bertoias, with Val Bertoia, which was a very good friend of mine, who went on to design this very special, he was a national or semi-national boomerang championship champion. And in his father's workshop in this farmhouse in Pennsylvania, he devised all of these different shapes of boomerangs. And so we spent many, many hours flying boomerangs in outside of Harry Bertoia's workshop. So for me, I mean, design and being an artist was something which was very, happened very, very early on. I was just sort of thrown into it. But then from going to school at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, I mean, that was for me also another formative and essential sort of design and art environment. I mean, for me, it was something which was just unbelievable to finally be in a place where everybody was as odd and unordinary as I was. A kind of design misfit, and then finding your tribe among all other artists and designers was, for me, just a revelation. And that was a time of increasing interest, which I had in sculpture. From sculpture, I went into design and architecture, gravitating towards the professors who became mentors of mine, with Rodolfo Machado and Jorge Silvedia, as well as others. David Brisson, a wonderful, just brilliant mathematician, taught this class Into the Fourth Dimension, which was also about how Euclidean geometry in a fourth dimension changes and deforms in relation to time and space, as well as then the first introduction, which I had to the Panza collection. This is going through from 1978 to 1980, of traveling when I was studying in London at the Architectural Association, of seeing this Panza collection of American minimalist, post-minimalist, and California light artists. And I've been through already 12 years of American art education, and I did not know that there was a minimal and post-minimal of artists such as like James Turrell, of course, Larry Bell, Dan Flavin, Dan Graham. So I had to take the journey to another school, a foreign school, to learn about an American culture, which I did not know I had, but began to embrace while I was at school in London. While studying with Koolhaas, Zaha was in her 5th year, and with Motion and the whole crew of just amazing mentors that were at the Architectural Association that year. But one of them, which was Dalibor Vasselli, who is a philosopher and kind of phenomenologist, that really kind of seeded and introduced to me again this American sort of postmodern movement in architecture and sort of studies, the art and technology program that was happening in the late 70s to mid 80s in California, Pasadena, his connection with NASA, and the way which then it slowly, for me, began to sort of coalesce between art and industry, between design and philosophy, between practice and becoming a practitioner of design, which for me, I mean, it was really about this consumption and also distillation of design, which is less about representing a concept or a theory than it is more about creating a heightened sense of place that speaks directly to beauty, to this idea of sensibility and this idea of simplicity. To do something simple is a very, very complex and very detailed performance. And everybody, if they find their voice as a designer, hears that voice and finds a voice in very odd and sometimes strange places, or just by having a moment to read a book, a line of poetry, something which draws you towards a better understanding of who you are and what you like to do. And so therefore, it's something which really has this sense of comfort and of creating spaces which have, as my colleagues have been speaking about, as a kind of emotional, sensorial connection to it, that everything has memory, whether it's old, whether it's of the present day, which is what we call modernity, and whether it has a kind of future forward presence attached to it.
It's so interesting that the conversation that you're leading in so much of what we've talked about is using the same words. I've just been writing down this journey and experimentation, skills, open-mindedness, philosophy, practice, practitioner, mentorship. These are really the key elements that sounds like all four of you that we've been speaking with have found as almost as important as your design education itself. And that, I think, has been a really fascinating conversation that's come out of the conversation we're having. Michael, one last question for you before we turn it over for Q&A. If you were to go back in time at this moment to yourself as a student, what is the advice you would give yourself coming into design?
Well, that's quite a different. It's a perfect question which can very well be answered.
That's wonderful.
So, a very interesting question. I think it's something which just thinking about any experience which I had, you're always looking for someone to take and find information and knowledge from. So I would say it's just very important. As an art teacher told me when I was about 8 years old in Pennsylvania, he said, if it's something which is interesting to you, pick it up and do it every day. So if it's drawing, simply draw one thing every day. And also to find somebody that interests you, someone's work that you just find that you just become passionate about. Find out more about what it is that excites you about that designer or architect, and then actually find a way in which to go work for them, to be in their studio, or if you can't work for them or be in their studio, to find ways in which they and the work influences you further. And of course, stay curious, continue to doubt yourself. Because in doubting, there's a level of curiosity and adventure. And also, it's one of the ways in which you can find trust in the things which you do by practicing what it is that you do every day. And in the end, stay engaged, be in a world where you can find beauty and make beauty, and to make things not harder, but simpler, not only to understand, but also simpler to use.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Design is such a process of repetition and passion. And thank you, Michael, for sharing that with us today. So now I guess we turn it back over to the originals and we hear some questions from the audience.
Great. Thank you all so much for those insights. We're going to turn over to audience Q&A. Students, we're going to try and get through as many questions as possible, but I apologize in advance if we don't get to all of them. We have one really interesting one that's come through, and I'd love to hear from Emily, Tomoko, and Aslam on this one. What have been your biggest challenges or surprises in adapting to the culture of the American design industry? Awesome. Maybe we could start with you.
This requires some thinking. I think, well, I would say American design industry, but specifically New York City, of course, which is an incredibly fast-paced city. For me, definitely adapting to the pace of, the city, but also the city in a work environment was maybe challenging when I first started, but, I think I got the hang of it pretty quickly. The other aspects would be basically, it's a very intense work day, and every day is like that. Basically, you become sort of like the superhuman. You have to, turn your attention from one moment to another, from one project to another. And I think, actually it does give you an enormous brain power to be able to adapt to all of these. Culturally, I haven't really practiced design in any other country, so it's really hard to say. But I do find, the advantage of, and this is not a challenge, it's the advantage that I find the design industry and the environments that we work in are very democratic. It's not necessarily very hierarchical. They're very open-minded, and there's a lot of objectivity. No matter where you come from and what your background is. So I would say that that's a very big plus, because that sort of invites everybody to participate and, have their voices in the story. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Emily, if we could hear from you next.
Sure. To me, definitely I agree with Özlem. The hierarchy is really different in US. I mean, in France, you called everybody Monsieur, Madame. Here you don't. Even your clients, sometimes you call them by the first name, which to me was really surprising. And of course, another big challenge was, I learned everything in metric. You come in US, you don't use that. And you learn everything into euros, and you come in US and no, it's dollars. So to me, it was a great challenge in a way that you have to relearn everything, all of your basics, but it's kind of like make you focus on the design more in a way.
Great point. Tomoko, if we could hear from you as well.
Okay, definitely, I think New York City or big city has fast pace, and then everything moving forward so quickly, and sometimes it has some stress, but stress is transferred to another level of energy. So it's a positive and negative maybe. And then as Emily mentioned, yes, I got the education in the United States. So there was not that much difficulty to convert from centimeter to inches, but sometimes there might be some challenge. But other than that, no matter where you are working, but great inspiration in here and the big city in New York, we are filled with art and architecture, history. So that's a great inspiration anytime.
Absolutely. One student has written in that they believe interior architecture is the most sophisticated cross-junction of multiple design disciplines. Can you tell us about your process of integration of different disciplines into one?
Sure. Basically, when we start the project, we think holistically, obviously, and in the first phases of the project, which happen to be the concept and schematic design phases, we're basically trying to come up with a narrative and, a design vision. And we relate our ideas a lot of times to conceptual art or to, to an historic element. And this could be Roman architecture, or it could be American modernism. So we always try to weave, art and history into our design vision, one way or another. And of course, when we speak about other disciplines, we also have the technical disciplines. We're talking about, engineering, we go into a project thinking about this holistically, meaning that how does the air move through the space? How do we integrate lighting into the space? And, how do we bring in the layer of art, which can actually start very much at the beginning phases? How do we, integrate different layers of the sensory effects that we want to pull into the space. So I believe that as a design office, design studio, we have a very integral way of approaching design. And it doesn't happen in a disjointed way. And that sort of is fed through the entire project at at each phase.
Great, thank you. One student has written, I am an international student with a background in architecture. Currently, I'm pursuing my master's degree in interior architecture and looking for a job, but I don't have enough working experience. Any advice for me and for the students tuning in to start my career in the field of design in the US?
If I could offer, one of the best ways for which to do that, a lot of offices offer internships, and internships are the best way which to gain experience, to really, find or be attracted by a design or a design company, a designer or a design company that interests you. Because as much as you're interested in what it is that someone else is doing, the role of finding or the ability to find a project and a company with a job opportunity is to really, find what it is that they're interested in and really sort of zero in on those 2 or 3 designers that you like. A lot of shops do offer internships, so that is a very good way to get entry if there are not any job openings. And with that, you can also have a very good feel for the culture, for the kind of disposition, the range of work, the process of which you go through to see if it is a right fit. Again, any practice is good practice. Any sort of gig in terms of design, even if it's freelance, if it's on a part-time or temporary basis, while you're working towards getting maybe more experience within it. But any kind of hands-on experience is the best experience, not only to challenge yourself, but also to find the right type of collaborators that you want and would like to be part of in terms of your journey.
Absolutely, great points. Well, we are out of time for today. I want to say a huge thank you to the Gabellini Sheppard team for coming on and sharing all of these insights. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about Gabellini Sheppard, you can visit gabellinisheppard.com. If you'd like to learn more about Be Original Americas, you can visit beoriginalamericas.com. Thank you again, and students, we will see you on the next one.